Dave and I had been waiting weeks for rain so Sandy Creek could have enough water in it for canoeing. Finally, on a Friday night, we got a good rain. So I went down the creek on Saturday morning and, well, that rain had been a little heavier than I realized. Not only was the creek full from bank to bank, it had flooded a 20-acre field out there in the creek bottom. Well, Dave never did show up, but it was such a pretty day, I just decided to go by myself. Started paddling down that flooded field, but once I got past the flooded field, the hills started closing in on the creek and the water got deeper and the current got faster. I passed this doghouse that had a big rooster on top of it, and that rooster looked worried. But when he saw me, that rooster just started crowing. Now, I can't say for sure because I don't speak chicken, but it sounded to me like that rooster said, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Sure glad I'm not in with you!" And that was just a little bit disheartening. But it wasn't till I saw the mallard duck that I got to thinking I might be in trouble. That mallard duck was wearing pink water wings. Well, the current got a little faster. I heard this rumble up ahead like a waterfalls or rapids or something, and as fast as I was going, whatever it was, I was going over it. It wasn't until I got right up to it that I saw it was a huge beaver dam. My canoe shot over that dam, flew through the air, dropped down about 8 feet, hit the water, skipped once, bounced, and landed on the trunk of this tree that had fallen down and was sloping up just out of the water. Here I was, completely out of the water, soaking wet, and I lost my paddle. And I want to tell you, there's not much worse than being stuck up a tree without a paddle. I got to wondering what kind of a beaver builds a dam like that when swimming up the creek towards me was this humongous beaver. That beaver was at least 3 or 4 times bigger than any beaver I'd ever seen in my life. He was swimming against that current like it was nothing, and in its mouth, that beaver was dragging my paddle. Well, I tied a loop in the end of the rope that was on the front of the canoe, and as that beaver went by, I lassoed my paddle. But the beaver didn't let go. He just kept right on swimming up the creek, drug me and the canoe off that tree and back into the creek. He got up to the dam and started over, and that's when I saw why that beaver was so big. That beaver was half buffalo. His shoulders and chest were just massive, and coming out of the sides of his head, you could see little horns. Well, the beaver crawled up the dam, was just getting ready to go over the top, when I heard a quack, whack, and that beaver flew off there backwards like he'd been hit in the head. On his way down, he let out this blood-curdling sounded just like a mad buffalo. In the process, my paddle slipped out of his mouth, and me and the canoe started drifting on downstream. And it's a good thing we did. When that beaver came back to the surface, he was mad, slammed his big old flat tail down on the surface, and must have thrown water 23 feet in the air. If I'd have still been around there, he'd have swamped my canoe for sure. But I was on downstream. I rounded a bend in the creek, and what do I see in front of me but the bridge for the light plant road? Now, the light plant road had been closed for years because the bridge was out. But the I-beams for the floor of that bridge were still there across the creek, about 7 inches off the water. Way too low to go under, and the speed I was going, there was no way my canoe was going to survive crashing into those I-beams. At this point, I did what I like to think any sane, straight-thinking man would do in a situation like that. I panicked. I started paddling just as fast as I could paddle for the creek bank. The current caught my canoe, turned it sideways, and wrapped it right around a tree. I managed to jump up and grab onto that tree, standing there on the remains of my canoe. The tree was just like a telephone pole. There were no limbs way above my head before there were any limbs. What was I going to do now? The current was too fast, the water too deep. There was no way I was going to be able to get over to the creek bank. I looked around, and what do I see swimming down the creek towards me but that mallard duck I'd seen earlier in the day. I knew it was the same duck because I recognized the yellow lilies on his pink water wings. And then it hit me. That duck is somebody's pet. Where would a wild mallard get pink water wings? So I just called him over. "Here, ducky duck." He swam right over to me, looked up at me, and started quacking like he was trying to tell me something, but I had no idea what he was saying because I don't speak duck a bit better than I speak chicken. He finally gave up, got up, and flew off. Well, what am I going to do now? In just a little while, there comes Ducky flying back. And he's got a little spool of wire hanging down from his bill, and there's a hook dangling off the end of that wire. He flew right at that tree I was on, and just as he got to the tree, he swooped to the side, but the hook caught on the tree. Ducky went around that tree about 7 times. Then he flew off to another tree over on the creek bank back 15, 20 feet from the water. And he must have gone around that tree, I don't know, 13 times. Then he did this quadruple corkscrew maneuver, wrapped the end of the wire right around itself, dropped the spool, and flew off again. What in the world is going on here? In just a little while, Ducky's coming back, and this time he's got a packet hanging down from his bill. He flew right over me and dropped that packet, and I reached out and caught it. Read on the side of it, micro carbon fiber zipline harness, 500-pound capacity. Well, who am I to argue? I got into the harness, I shinnied up the tree, I took the little pulley and hooked it up on the wire, lifted up my feet, and I ziplined from the tree across the water over to the creek bank, where I dropped down and sat there gasping for air. Whoo-wee! What a day! Well, sir, Ducky comes over, jumps up in my lap, and starts giving me little duck kisses all over the face. And that's when I noticed he's got a chain around his neck. And on that chain is a 3-ounce can of Mountain Dew. You know, like the little barrels the St. Bernards wear in the Alps. And attached to the outside of that can is Ducky Duck's official Homeland Security undercover rescue duck identification. Was I lucky or what?